Hello, this is the fifth video in the CartRack YAR series. Yeah, just some helps and overviews to save you having to read all the help and just looking at some of the detail underneath. This is looking at the settings in CartRack Driver and also the font sizes. Font sizes is a new thing within CartRack YAR. A lot of the other settings go back a few versions. Let's have a look. Here we are. We've got CartRack open. This is Driver and the session open. Somewhere in here there was a file, I thought. There we are. This one in particular. Sadly, it's a very long word. So it's spilled over. Also, what's happened over the years since I started putting CartRack together is monitors have got much bigger, and the font in CartRack didn't scale. So I was able to make a couple of significant changes for this version. One is to do away with 10 pages and have 18, which I think is really useful. And the other was to make the font sizes bigger. Now you can see they're already pretty large. They would default to being much smaller than this. This has been tinkered with. And they're filling the buttons very well. Now, to adjust those, you can go into the Sessions Config window. We're going to have a look at these other tabs, but let's start with the font sizes. Now here, you can see that we can actually make quite a few changes, and it's pretty obvious which ones you're doing because it happens on the fly. Down the bottom, first of all, these timer labels, if you watch where it says couldn't make my mind up, you can have a different colour on those. Traditionally, that's been red, but on this version, I found that actually black is very effective. That's that one. Now for these sliders, this is just a case of, well, what do I like the look of? Slide this one down. There you go. As you can see, it's incredibly slow because of the software that's recording this. Trust me, it's normally much, much faster. Now I would say that is probably about the size the font has always been. So, and you can see that these buttons have just got bigger and bigger. So that was getting a bit silly. Let's try and use the space. Now, of course, it depends how you're going to name all your buttons. Where's that dodgy? It's not on this page, is it? Anthropology I'm looking for. That was, there we go, up here. So several ways you can look at it. How many lines how many rows do I want of text as it wraps round? And what about longer words? Do I care actually if they break onto a line or not? Let's go to there, back a bit. There we go. Let's have it there. That'll do. Then utility, that's things like the page buttons, all that bank on the right. And now the one I look out for, pages I would name with probably one word. It's that change mode button at the bottom there that I'm keeping an eye on. 3 rows, about like that. Leave a little bit of space around it. Top row, that's all these buttons and labels across the top. Let's try that. Timer labels, there you go. Can you see that? Do you want to be able to see all of a very long title, or do you just, you know, let's make sure I can see it from the other side of the room? And then finally the timers. So you've got the choice of saying, well, actually the time is really important to me. I don't care too much about that. I've put it on there. I know what it should be, or whichever suits you. Set. Let's close that. Now, while we're on font sizes, it's probably quite important to have a similar scaling in Navigator. Let's open the same file. Did I double click that? I don't think I did. There aren't so many settings to worry about in Navigator. So there's font size has its own button over here. So we hit that. You can see it's quite similar. Fewer button types. Now, the first thing you can do if you only have one monitor, or you have two identical monitors, so not only in size but in resolution, then the sensible thing to do would be to say, whatever the sizes are that I've applied in driver, set them here. Then, obviously, it makes editing your sessions much easier. Now, if you do have two monitors, then obviously you could have navigator in one and driver in the other, and if they were different sizes, well, that would mean that probably you'd have this a bit different, depending whether it's a bigger monitor or a smaller monitor. And you could keep saving the session. It would say, oh, okay, you're working on the same session. Do you want me to update it? And you can go, yes. So you can very quickly, if you haven't got the same view in each, you can update driver, almost as quickly and see what kind of offset adjustment you have to make. So I'm really pleased with that. That's a really good thing. Let's put it back. So I've only got one monitor here. So that's exactly the same. Close that. And finally, this I just want to cover the other tabs in this sessions and config window. Now, the first one we've talked about before. Simply put a path here to the folder where you keep your CartRack sessions. You can have multiple folders, but you'll have to keep browsing to find the different, each one. And unless you've got lots and lots of sessions, I would just have one folder and keep them in there. Okay, let's open that one. Just for larks. Can't believe how slow this computer is with this recording software running. The next one is hardware devices. Again, unless you lose your ini file in the folder, this isn't likely to change. Actually, the most likely way is to change is if you have, say, a USB device and you run CartRack up with it unplugged. It will default to no device here or no sound, and next time you'll have to reset it. It'll throw up an error. But to all intents and purposes, this will stay. So this top one is channel 1, which is where I have a track loaded at the moment. That is the audio device that sound will come out of. Obviously, ideally, you have different devices going into a mixing desk so you can crossfade between them. Settings. Now, I've talked about the database. It's actually just a text file in your CartRack folder. Let's see if I can just remind you, for those who didn't see the first video, I've got it in this convenient folder here. This is the CartRack YAR folder. It might be CartRack 8 folded if you're using an older version. The database is in this file, and it's a memory of all the files that you have edited. You've gone in and done a button edit of some sort, and it's just a memory of, okay, this file, don't answer me # the Alan Parson project.mp3. The track label we want is don't answer me. The title label we want, the artist label we want is the Alan Parson project. It remembers that, so when you next time try to use this track, this file, it will automatically label using these for you. Now, if for some reason you didn't want that to be operating, I can't think of a reason why you would, you can turn it off there. As I mentioned before, you can effectively have a hardware controller to pause, play and stop these channels, and it's buttons on the number pad of your keyboard, or you can get a little tiny, for £5, you can get a little USB number pad. Look in the help file to see which buttons they are, because I always get them muddled up. Or you can make a hardware controller. You can get a little device. If you look on the Facebook CartRack group, you'll see there's a document showing you how to make a hardware controller using a cheap little device. The one disadvantage of the number pad is that the num lock always has to be on. Else you'll be pressing those buttons and it will just be typing a number somewhere. It won't be starting your track. Now, by default, I've got CartRack to keep an eye on that num lock button, and if it turns off, it'll turn it back on immediately. If you don't want it fiddling with that and you're not using the buttons, then you can turn that feature off. But by default, it's on for obvious reasons. This one, if you notice up here, I was going to talk about this in a future video, but here we are. We've got these 4 buttons. By default, they come up with saying 1 down, 2 down, 3 down, 4 down. That's talking about these timers at the bottom. As you can see, I've got a track on here. It's 4 minutes and 6 seconds long. So at the moment, because it's not playing, it's saying 4 minutes, 6 seconds. If I play it, it's counting down. If I click this button, it's counting up. So we can see how much has gone. This here changes that default position. So if you would rather have them counting up as default, you can set it here and it will remember that. Then this final set of settings here, I like it on global actually. This goes back to your hardware controller, whether it's just the number pad buttons on the keyboard. If you are doing your radio thing or whatever it is, and you're also using Wikipedia to look up information about bands or whatever it might be, driver and navigator will lose focus. Okay, so they're working, but they're not the program at the front of the screen, so to speak. So if you're on, let's say you're on Wikipedia and you need to hit the button that makes track 2 play, there was a time, then it wouldn't do it. You would just type a number 2 somewhere. But now there's a key. For some time now, there's been a keyboard hook, which CartRack can keep an ear out, and if you press that button, track 2 will fire off, even though you might be doing something else. So it still might type that number into what you're doing. If you happen to be writing a letter and you need to play a track on Driver in a hurry, and you know that letter will appear in your Word document, but it'll also fire off the track. Now you can have that on Driver only. So that just means you've effectively turned it off. So Driver needs to be focused. So that would mean, this being bold up here. You can do it so that as long as you're in CartRack, so you could be editing a session in Navigator and you can still control Driver. Or global is where I say whatever you're doing, you press a button and Driver will respond. There's one caveat. I've recently found that on a more recent version of Cubase does the same sort of thing, and it hogs the keyboard. So if you are doing a show on the same computer where you're playing CartRack and recording perhaps on Cubase, you need to make sure that CartRack is in focus if you want to use the keys. It's really annoying because that's what I do. And I haven't been able to defeat it. Cubase wins. But that said, I mean, if you set Cubase off to be recording, you minimize it, or just keep an eye on it and never go back to it. That's the settings. Font sizes we've seen, settings we've seen, hardware devices. There we go. The next video is back to Navigator and managing pages. There you go. Thanks very much.